Welcome to Best of Three, an esports podcast by Organized Gaming. I'm Mike.
I'm Alex Kim.
And today with us, we have Shane Talbot. Shane, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks.
Yeah.
Shane is the esports manager at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, which we will be calling MLSE for those of you who don't know. He was formerly the chief operating officer at Luminosity Gaming, and before that, he was the director of growth and partnerships at Unicorn. So, Shane, you've kind of been around a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, you have I was looking at your LinkedIn a little bit, and you have a pretty crazy resume. I would
true.
say. Yeah,
It starts off slow, right? Like you come out of school and you're 4 years in the same software company. It doesn't really feel that way.
Right.
But then I started taking some chances and seeing where that was leading to. And then, I just got rest. It wasn't even that I didn't like what I was doing at any stop, but just other really exciting opportunities that I felt like I was making for the right reasons, because it was usually less money, more responsibility, earlier stage. But I knew that the projects that I was jumping into, like Luminosity, were super credible and had been doing great on their own prior to that point. So opportunity to kind of get onto that, that rocket ship, I guess, and be a part of it. And then that led to other opportunities, obviously now with MLSE. So, so it happened fast in hindsight, but during it didn't feel all that fast, to be honest.
Well, and then, he joined MLSE in January of 2018, where now he's responsible for operations for the Raptors Uprising Gaming Club, Toronto FC's Pro FIFA program, Leafs Gaming League. Am I missing anything?
Just other industry initiatives. Yeah. We're a big world-class venue. So before my time, they hosted League of Legends Championship Series here. And so, we're definitely very interested in continuing to bring world-class events here. So there's other projects that we're exploring that are like longer term, less tactical day to day, but.
Yeah, League of Legends. I forgot that happened. That was a sold out event, right?
Totally. Yeah. Middle of the summer. It was the executive team's sort of first real experience seeing, an esports audience. And I think the story they tell me is that our then CCO, sort of kicked off this initiative to explore esports. And so when the NBA came knocking and said, we're going to do an NBA 2K league, like they tell me it was like one call. It was like, they were like, we're in. We know you don't know all the details yet, but just we're in.
Yeah, right.
Let's do this. Because they were on a sales effort trying to convince other markets to do it, right? And so we were already primed for it. So before my time. But
what's the capacity look like at ACC?
Oh God, you're gonna put me on the spot.
So
I'll buy time while I Google. Right. That there are different floor plans depending upon the event and depending upon whether you have a Leaf game. Obviously, there's the rink goes in, and so that changes it.
So MLSE's mission
19,800, and again, I don't know. I think that's definitely the arena. If you have a concert, there's floor seating and there's different things you can do, right? So it changes.
20K?
It's flexible.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's awesome.
Okay, that's a huge crowd.
I think I'm not sure that it was the entire arena for LCS. Only because there are certain sight lines. Like maybe it was. For
I think it was because I saw pictures and it went all the way 360.
I wasn't there, and again wasn't here at that time. I think I'm confusing that with what they did at Arthur Ashe for Fortnite. They didn't film the Lower Bowl at Arthur Ashe.
I see.
So that's why I was confusing those two events.
All right. Well, MLSE's mission is simple. It's to bring the world to its feet. Their desire is to create winning teams and deliver championships to its fans. Our desire at Best of Three is to highlight and educate ourselves and our audience in sections of esports that have always kind of been around and have always been important, but aren't necessarily widely known. And that's why we're here today. We want to hear from an industry expert.
And who better to hear from than Shane?
There you go. Exactly.
High expectations.
No pressure. So just to kind of go back into the history, and I'm sure you know quite a bit, but maybe if you can help fill in any of my knowledge gaps too. The Maple Leafs, Toronto Maple Leafs were established in 1917. This is just for the people who might not already know. As one of the original 6 teams making up the NHL. Woo! They merged with the 4-year-old NBA in 1998 and moved into the Air Canada Centre, which is now called the Scotiabank Arena. I know you called it the ACC a couple seconds ago.
Well, it was the ACC
that's
when
true.
they
Back
had
then it was.
The League of Legends tournament.
You're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
Yeah.
As of 2018, it's the Scotiabank Arena. 2005, MLSE relocated its AHL team from Newfoundland to Toronto. 2007, added Toronto FC. I'm skipping past this because 2010, they completed Maple Leaf Square, known by Torontonians as Jurassic Park.
Yes.
Which, for those outside of Toronto who may have seen Toronto win the NBA Finals earlier this year,
world champs,
you may have seen a few shots
champs.
of that. Yeah. We hold that with very high regard. How does it feel to have been here while that happened, by the way?
It was cool.
Did you get a ring?
I am getting a ring. We don't have them yet. They're not the same ring. There are tiers, right? There was one that was quite high value that we could have got, but I didn't have that kind of cash to fork out for it. So I got the one. It's got some diamond and some stuff. It's decent, but it's not cool. It's not the same.
I would love to see that sometime.
Yeah, when I get it, I think in December we're getting them. So
fantastic. All right.
Right. Well, and then in 2018, when Shane, came on the scene at MLSE, now, what was your role in creating Raptors Uprising? Was that your baby, or?
Well, I mean, they had committed long before that.
Right.
There was a process a year before where they got the franchises to buy in. So they were in, and they went through a whole brand build, and they had a really cool launch video, like definitely the highest production launch video of all the teams in the league. It was a la like We the North style, all CG, but like big landscapes and lots of animation and stuff like that. So it was a really cool launch. And when I knew that this gig was coming, because I had a job alert set up on their careers page for anything related to esports, NBA 2K. Like, I'm not even a 2K guy, but I just knew that was their first foray, and I figured that wasn't going to be their only foray. So that would be the project they would start hiring for first. So I had all those alerts set up. So I knew that this role was coming at some point, and so I was watching the brand when it launched and stuff like that. And in the meeting, I met one of our marketing directors who I now know well, and I said who's doing the actual tweeting, and he said he was, and I was like, it's been pretty authentic voice. Like, I think in hindsight, like he just used fam a lot.
Right.
Not to knock him if you're listening, PK.
That is Toronto slang,
yeah. But like, it was cool to just see this Raptors affiliated social account not talking like a corporate marketer.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, we made a huge effort on that this season with our voice on our channels to try to be authentic and sound like a member of the community. But I can't even remember what the original question that sent me on this tangent was.
Me neither, and I love where it went. Yeah.
I'll hit you with another one. You guys won an award this year. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, it was the NBA 2K Business Awards. So we all went to Indianapolis. It was
Indy.
Where the Pacers play in the arena there, and they were great hosts. It was really cool. And we had our annual summit, and so Darren Ravel was there, and they do, they bring in people from the sports industry, and they do panels, and we talk about the state of the league, and we learn what's coming new for season 3, and we have general manager meetings and talk about stuff related to players and in-game things and stuff like that. So it's cool. So anyway, they did the business awards on the first night, and we were a finalist for 3 of the 4 awards, but ended up winning the one that I wanted, which was Digital Innovator of the Year. I don't want to say the one I wanted, but the one that if I had to choose an award, I would. Digital Innovator of the Year is a cool summary of the work that we did. So
what goes into being the Digital Innovator of the Year? What does that mean?
I mean, it's interpreted by the rest of the teams. We all vote, and the league staff and stuff like that. So what it means is, there's like a broad outline of, you sort of excelled in creating content and engaging your fan base online and in growing and in, partnering with influencers and just creating brand awareness and such like that. And we had some pretty cool content wins. Chris was involved in.
Yeah, Chris.
And one of them called Six Tape. And funny enough, so Darren Ravel was at the event, and so he tweeted to his 2.4 million followers or whatever it is, that we won the Digital Innovator of the Year. And the art he used in his tweet was the cover art for the Six Tape series that Chris edited with us.
Very cool. Congratulations, Chris.
That's amazing.
and in the NBA circulated press release, they specifically, like the one campaign they specifically referenced for whatever reason was the Six Tape series as well. Which is cool.
It was a very cool series. You guys paired up local artists with gameplay from the Raptors Uprising, right? So
yeah, basically it was like highlights there's a lot of highlights, right? It's funny because esports is exactly like sports in the sense that I think most teams coming in figured, we got to make sure we're putting a lot of gameplay content out there. And really what builds these brands is the behind the scenes stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so we have a documentary series called North Code, which quite frankly is probably the thing that puts us at the top of that pedestal every year in terms of our digital play, because it's a really cool behind the scenes documentary series. It's, you know, maybe I'm biased, but it's well produced. It feels like Netflix.
Yeah, I've caught a couple of those episodes, and they're made really well. So
yeah, so
really
it feels
cool.
like Netflix, right? Like my mom watches and like she doesn't know the first thing about 2K or
you don't have
esports,
to.
and
It's behind the
it's
scenes.
not that. It's not that part of the story, right?
Yeah.
But we tie enough of it in that you get a sense for how competitive it is and the level of strategy that goes into it and all that. So the point is that, you know, I think season 1 there was an overemphasis from all the teams in the league on just like highlight content, and it was just super easy wins because there's Twitch clipping. So we put out way too much of that, and it wasn't a good way to like really build a fan base and audience and get them emotionally hooked on the team and the stories behind the team and stuff like that. So, but it's an important part of running a sports team's social account is that you recap the game results and you show highlights and such, right? So we wanted to do it, but we wanted to do it well this year. And knowing that those, you know, those highlights don't usually perform as well from an engagement perspective relative to like the docu content, we thought, okay, well, let's add a music element here. And also, I think strategically, if you look at 2K, because there was really no pro competitive scene before the 2K League, it was very small, like Pro-Am thing, where the only way to watch was to have one of the players competing in Pro-Am stream their perspective, and you would watch that way. And so the biggest people would get a couple thousand or even a few hundred viewers. And so it wasn't huge. So the fact that it's gone from nothing to what it is now, like the product is great. The entertainment value, honestly, even though they pay me to say it, is really there. Like I worried coming in because I came from more of an endemic background, as you guys talked about in the beginning with Luminosity, and I didn't know the game well, and so I didn't know what the skill ceiling was. I didn't know what the level of strategy was. That's all there in spades. The game is super deep. The way we play, it's really cool. It's kind of like a hero-based esport. So at the beginning of the game, everybody chooses an archetype at their position. This season, there was 5 archetypes times 5 positions. Right. Not all archetypes can work together, but they have strengths and weaknesses, and so it really forces a dynamic offense. It, you know, what happens in NBA in 2K, like in the retail version, is in Pro-Am everybody just builds up superheroes, and it's really flat, like 5-out offense. Everybody stands behind the arc, ISO ball, just kind of like that. Yeah, that's right. But with our league, there's limitations to what every individual player archetype can do. And so you have to work as a team, and you have to run set plays, and you have to be dynamic. And what's blown my mind about this game is that there are people who have exceptional ability, even among the pros, that nobody else has, right? And the same is true in every great esport, of course, right? Yeah. But like, it's visibly obvious when you watch this guy BP, who was a high draft pick this year by the Kings, and he just got traded for like a record amount of assets to the Atlanta Hawks organization just last week. I watched him. I was at this tournament in Orlando. We had a good run there, and there's a cool North Code episode on it if you want to check that out. And so I was sitting watching like the quarterfinals, and all of a sudden his player model is just doing things, dribbling I've never seen. Like of all the the 2K gameplay I've watched, scouting, watching our guys, watching the rest of the league play, I've just never seen anyone do this before. And I'm thinking like, this is like coded into the game. Like this is possible with the right sequence, right? That you can do this. And yet even among the most elite point guards in the world, this kid's doing it different than everybody else. And so that's what's really cool. There is a skill ceiling high enough that you can have a personal style. And even within teams, like there's not just people who are good at playing center and they're centered the same way. Like again, my Counter-Strike is what I grew up on, so it's the same thing with oppers, right? There's like people who op like JW and they're aggressive and they almost use it like a shotgun, and then there's people who sit back and they're more like a turret, camping, like Fallen or So it's the same thing. Like there are people who play the same role within a team but do it entirely differently than the other elite players doing the same thing. So there's not one way to do it. So there's very much an ability to express yourself through your style. Which is cool. Anyway, back to the content. So we wanted to expose that side of the game more to the 12 million people in North America who bought the game last year, who log in and play as the Raptors with 4 AI on the court, right? Yeah. They're playing versus mode 1v1 against someone else as NBA teams, right? And this game gets deeper than that, right? And so we know that there's a massive consumer base who buys the game every year. The competitive scene is significantly smaller now and growing thanks to the NBA 2K League of course.
Yeah.
But what we want to do is find relevant crossover points where we can meet the rest of the 2K community in Toronto who's not tuned into Pro-Am, but plays 2K, loves the Raptors, loves basketball, mostly loves 2K, goes home and plays 2K as the Raptors.
There's a massive following. I think
Absolutely.
I think that it was the highest selling game of 2019 in the United States, 2K20.
2K20, yeah, it's a top performing sports game right now.
And it's only
of all
been out
time,
like
just
what,
had a
2
record.
months?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, I actually read that
Intense.
it was the highest selling game in the States for any category.
Yes.
So it was, even I think previous to that was MK11.
Yeah, I think so.
like,
You're more up to speed, but I caught the same headlines.
Yeah,
so,
that's crazy. That's absolutely massive. I did not know that it had such a following.
I compare it to Counter-Strike, which Counter-Strike is probably the game, like I don't know this for sure, but that has the highest percentage of like active players who tune into the big tournaments, right? So like you get 1 million concurrents watching the major, but there's only 11 million actives on like your average month. I haven't actually kept up with it, but the last time I saw it was relatively recent. It was about 11 million people playing the game monthly, right? So when you have like 10% of the player base watching the pro stuff, that's pretty cool.
That's absolutely massive.
Yeah,
That's really big.
It's significant. You know, these other games that do really well have 100 million players, or peaked at 100 million. Now they're down
like
to
League
tens of
millions,
millions,
has
right? But yeah,
massive
many
fan
multiples
base
on
and-
that. Not an equivalent multiple on viewership, I don't think. Although they're simulcasting on Twitch and YouTube, of course. But but our audience, is really not going to be reached through Twitch, because we're not trying to get people who are playing. If you're an NBA 2K player, it's not because necessarily you're a gamer and play a lot of games, right? There's a huge consortium of these players who are just basketball guys, hip hop culture, that sort of thing. And the one game they play is 2K, right? So to reach those people, we thought, okay, well, let's align with local hip hop artists, right? Let's feature their music. Let's do a gig. We give them a paid gig and do a concert with. We partner with North by Northeast in their Clubland series, and so we did a concert and contested it out. VIP access to what was essentially a private show. I mean, it was open doors, but it was a Sunday night, and a couple of the artists had some draw, but it was basically a private show for a bunch of fans that entered into a contest for us. And throughout the season, after every week of gameplay, we would fly to New York, play our matches, come home. Chris would start clipping highlights, and he would cut us together a supercut. Like, it's basically a mixtape, which is a common thing in our community. People put together these mixtapes, and there's always a soundtrack to them. And usually they're using music they don't have licensed. It's like Kanye West. It's absolute bangers. But because we were able to collab with local artists, they were excited to work with us, and we got to use their music and help showcase it. And we got some crossover with their fan base, obviously. And so that it's something that's I was really pleased with this year, and I think there's only more potential for it, and we're going to probably double down on it again next year.
If you guys can keep doing that, I thought that was a very, very cool concept and a good way to spin sort of the highlights.
Fantastic campaign.
Yeah.
Now, so what I'm curious about is MLSE in general. So I went earlier on in the episode on about all of the different things that MLSE has done to kind of bring up its sports presence. But now we're seeing not a shift, but an addition of esports into the whole thing, with you being, of course, a major player in that. And so I'm curious, what was MLSE seeing that they could introduce esports into its roster? What do you think?
They saw League come here, and they saw the arena full in the summertime, and it was honestly hard to be in the sports industry and not ignore it, right? Like everybody's talking about it, and there were a couple plays that at first seemed like crazy, like the 76ers and Dignitas and stuff like that. I was oh man, that's so awesome, incredible. And then Splice raised some money from Delaware North, and like that was big news back then. But those were much, 76ers was a full acquisition of Dignitas. That was big, but a funding round into an esports org back then. In contrast to now, they're making $20 plus $30 million investments into franchises. Like that's
seems like it's like everyday news now, but
things have gone fast from 0 to 100, right? So it was really hard to ignore it if you were in this business, right? And my boss is on strategy, so obviously one of the key things to explore in that case is the esports landscape.
Is how to do it. With the backing that MLSE already has, and with the audience, I suppose, right now it seems like everybody's kind of vying for each other's eyes. Is MLSE affected by that? Are they trying to not transition, but include esports into the eyes of existing sports fans?
Yeah.
Or are they trying to appeal to a whole new audience?
So I think there's a bit of a hedge against the future. So, it's a great way to create a connection to the next generation of Raptors fans, Leafs fans, who today might go to games with their parents or whatever, but probably then not even so often because it's not cheap to come to our games.
Definitely
right?
not. The prices have gone way up.
Right. Like, when I am lucky enough to get tickets, I think hard about who I'm bringing to that game because, there's a lot of demand. So,
Next time, maybe you want to hit me up.
There's a long list, my friend.
You and everyone else. Yeah.
And so I think it's, we recognize that people are playing Chell as the Leafs and they're playing FIFA as TFC. Less so. We create programs to get them to do that, but obviously when you're playing FIFA, it's, there's opportunities to play as European players. You're probably going to want to do that. But there definitely are fans who are doing that, and we do cool events where we bring them out and we play TFC versus TFC type tournaments, and so we know that this is a way to reach this audience, and quite frankly, if we don't keep them interested in traditional sports through this medium, then they might lose interest in the actual sport and they might go and just be only about Overwatch, or there's some risk of losing them, right? So I think it's a little bit of a hedge against that, and I think it's also an opportunity to learn about the esports industry in a way that is a natural extension of what we're already majorly invested in. It's an easy entry point for our partners who are used to sponsoring our traditional sports programs under the same banner.
And that's an important part, right? So
and when we're activating against things that are our bread and butter, then they have confidence that we're going to do a good job of it, because MLSE, long before me, and and no credit to me, has done an amazing job of establishing itself as an industry leader in every league that we participate in, and
definitely,
and especially on the partnerships and activation
side.
You
look at Leafs fans, and they're like diehard fans. Leafs haven't always been good, so.
right. But
I think they're doing a lot better now.
Leafs, I mean, it's been a hot and cold start, but we're bitten by some injury right now, and I think the team on paper is very promising. So let's hope we can iron some of those, to get some guys healthy and iron out some of those wrinkles, and hopefully it's going to be a great season.
Speaking of Leafs and injuries, I know Zach Hyman's injured right now. What do you think of E11? Just throwing that out there.
Well, it's 11. I'll just correct for the record.
It's
11 Gaming.
My bad.
Yeah, 11 Gaming, and they've merged with Soar Gaming as well.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, so it's cool. I mean, I love, it's awesome to see a NHL player. We know that they're all into gaming. We know that now. I mean, but it was breaking news 2 years ago when SportsCenter had that content about who was the best Fortnite player in the locker room. It was caught people off guard, and they're like, wait a minute, these guys are playing Fortnite, and
teams are banning Fortnite in the locker room.
Yeah,
and stuff,
and that was the headline. But just the fact that it was clear that these guys were not only playing, but playing pretty competitively. Like, they were taking it seriously to the point where they knew each person's sort of rank within the room, right? Where everyone stacked up. So that was only 2 seasons ago, and it was kind of shocking. And now it just doesn't even seem all that I guess abnormal that a player like Zach would own an esports team, because there's lots of people all around the sports world that are involved, starting teams, investors in teams, and that sort of thing. So it's awesome that he's passionate about it, and I know a lot of the people over there working at 11 Gaming, and they're all good people. So
fantastic,
cool, and they had success in the World Cup this year.
Amazing. So you know what? I think that's a pretty good time for us to go and take a break. When we come back, we're going to be going a little bit deeper into the specific teams that MLSE has. So we'll be talking about Raptors Uprising. We'll talk a little bit about the MLS, Leafs Gaming League, all of that when we come back from the break. So we'll see you in just a second. And we are back with our conversation with Shane Talbot. We're going to go a little bit deeper into the different teams that MLSE has to offer. And I want to start
doing.
Yeah, I want to start with Raptors Uprising. I know we've spoken about that a little bit, but I'm curious as to where it started, and then I want to go into kind of where we are right now. As of a couple days ago, even there's a news article that I wanted to cite. But again, right to the beginning of Raptors Uprising. What can you tell me about that?
So I got hired just before Christmas 2017, and then started like mid-January, January 15, 2018.
Oh, wow.
And so the brand had been launched, but we were like a month and a half out from draft at that point, and it was getting close. So most of the other teams had GMs already in place. And so, but that's when I got involved.
Yeah.
And, first things first, it was, let's put together a fan engagement plan, marketing tactics. We have these deals. There were a bunch of sponsorship deals already lined up, and there were certain commitments, but they had kept it at kind of a high level. They knew that whoever they hired for the role, they wanted to come in and kind of, have their say in what the specific content series would be and such. But they knew they wanted to do some video series, some live stream, that kind of stuff. So it was figuring that out. And then we did a big event, like a kickoff event at Real Sports, where we did a 2K LAN tournament.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a project. I've got the war story from that one if we have time. But
I would love to hear it.
Okay. Well, to answer your question, because for the context of what it is, so that was my start date, and then we drafted. The dates are blurring now, but it's in March, and that was cool. We went to Madison Square Garden, and we had a war room, which was basically like a change room, and Madison Square Garden is an old venue. Right. So it's like you're in the bowels of Madison Square Garden. It was not like a glamorous situation. I've got some photos. Maybe I'll send it to you in case you need some art for this. But it was like white brick walls, and you're in the bow, and you're on calls, and there's a whole show going on outside in Madison Square Garden in this like Hulu Theater, I think it was called. But I was in there calling in the picks, and I had a couple of analysts. One was in Australia, one was back here. We work with IBM on draft, so we had a couple guys from IBM on the call. And my AirPods, they kept telling me just weren't working, wasn't coming through clear. Oh. And we were troubleshooting how to do this, because I had to have one phone line to call in the picks, and then we were on, like a voice app, I think it was Discord, on another thing to talk to all the analysts. And so I ended up just, and we found out that the AirPods weren't coming through clear like minutes before it started. And like we just didn't have time to figure. So I just held my phone up to my ear, and the call ended up going whatever it was, like 6.5 hours or something. And I'm not kidding you. I had like pain in my index finger, like at one point went like numb essentially, but just from holding the phone up for like 6.5 hours like against my phone.
Damn.
Anyway, that was the kickoff of everything, drafting the team and then figuring out the fan engagement. And and then we did, the first big project, I guess, was this 2K tournament at Real Sports. So interesting. I mentioned earlier that we have these player archetypes in the game. So you're not just completely customizing your build. You've got 5 presets at each position. And when every game starts, the player chooses what archetype they're going to go with. So it can change game to game, but it cannot change throughout the game.
I see. Okay.
So you're not locking in for a season.
Is that a common for the players to change their archetypes every game?
For us, it is.
Okay. Okay.
It's more common than I think. Initially, going in, the plan for the league was to have 5 people per team. There's 5 players in game, obviously, but then a lot of concerns were raised about people getting sick and all that. So then the league, somewhat, in the 11th hour, added a 6th player to every team,
which makes sense.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people thought this was just sort of a fail-safe, a bit of an insurance plan in case someone gets sick. But we ended up, our 6th round pick ended up becoming a starter for us.
Oh wow!
And playing a key role at center, and a lot of other teams did do that, and I'd say, without knowing it, like statistically, that we're probably the team that has run the most unique, definitely up there, the most unique, both in terms of personnel and archetypes. And that's not necessarily a good thing, but every week the decisions to do that was based on there was a reason. We weren't throwing stuff at the wall, right? It was like based on the opponent that was coming up, or how things were going in practice, or what had happened the week prior. But
I think that's very important because that's, if you see a lot of the most winningest teams in different games, they're always keeping their opponents on their toes, coming up with new strategies. You see surprise things that happen that you just did not prep for. And
it also comes down to what you have to work with. So our game is a lot like real basketball in that if you have like an elite point guard, an elite center, teams can be built around star players. And we drafted 11th out of 17 teams in the first season. We got Kenny, who's an amazing player, incredibly versatile. I mean,
Kenny got work.
He's recognized and valued by teams all around the league. There's no doubt about it. But he's not that top 2-3 elite point guard like Radiant or Mama or Fab are. And so, you're not going to be able to just build a system around him. He's an amazing facilitator, incredible IQ, great positioning, great on defense, which was huge in season 1. Point guard in season 2 was kind of relinquished to the corner, which sucked because we had a great defensive player who was sort of more so in the corner. But the point is that, we were drafting a little bit later than, so our play had to be teamwork, trial and error, like figuring it out. There wasn't just a very obvious system of let Kenny iso ball, right? Like some other teams have the opportunity. And then because of our success in season 1, because we went on like a Cinderella run and finished 4th in the league, we were drafting late again in season 2.
Right.
And we're competitive. So, we didn't make the playoffs. We missed it by 2 games, but there was incredible parity this year in the league. The nice thing about the structured draft is that it's giving every team a chance to compete. We're the only league right now that's working this way with like an open combine for everybody who has the game, and then a draft. It's not a free market like it is in most of the other titles.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's created balance in the league. The combine is the first time that players get to try most of these archetypes.
Right.
It's not the exact same archetypes from combine that usually make it into the league, because they learn things in the combine and they improve them. And so they change a little bit by the time the league starts. But we wanted to try to simulate that. Not only did we want to simulate that, we had some limitations because of for some legal business reasons. We can't just do tournaments on NBA versus where you're playing as Raptors versus Raptors, right? There are there's a players association. There are CBA related reasons why we can't just use Raptors proper likeness and player likeness to market Raptors Uprising because that CBA was all negotiated before the 2K League.
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
Maybe that'll change in the next CBA negotiation. I'm not sure, but the point is we can't just do a more casual, accessible type of tournament for the every 2K player where they could just come in and play on a mode that they are familiar with. So we have to play it in more of like a pro-am type mode.
Right.
But we wanted to cast as wide a net and give people an opportunity. So we didn't want to also just make this on your own pro-am accounts because then we were only catering to the competitive community, and we needed to do them on PlayStation because PlayStation's our partner, and so we were doing a live event. So we decided, instead of cutting off half the Xbox community and limiting this to just the playoff, or the half the community with Xbox and then the playoff community, we decided to create our own combine ecosystem. And so we went in and we created basically enough archetypes for there to be a 3-on-3 tournament with 2 archetypes per position. So we created 6 unique archetypes essentially, and we created that across like enough Steam accounts to have 8 simultaneous matches going. And we were working with World Gaming, Toronto-based company that you guys are probably familiar with on that. And so for a week before that tournament, it was me and a bunch of people from World Gaming and some guys on my side too, just going into this movie theater at Scotiabank Theater. And just, we were installing, we had this cheat so we could do a speed hack. And if you apply the speed hack to 2K, it gets you through the cutscenes faster.
Okay.
So every single new account we created, we had to go through all the cutscenes racing through. And so we just had like an assembly line, and we had like 20 stations or whatever, and we were just grinding the creation of these accounts. And it was like we went and did one like full day session, and then we were like, we need another half day, and then that turned into a full day, and then there was even another half day, and then like the day of the tournament, we were still doing things, and we were getting locked out of accounts because we hadn't confirmed the emails. You're trying to do something for the first time that you're trying to work within the confines of the rules and the physical technical limitations of the game and all that, and make something work. And it was just a grind and a disaster. And then and then in the end, it turned out that my court on PC wasn't even stable. So we ended up. So I ended up calling audible and pivoting to the mode we're not supposed to do.
that 3 versus 3 setup that sounds very productive, I would say, for the groups of 6 that you guys are picking. Right, that seems like a mode that they can kind of practice against each other with.
Well, So I mean, the league is played 5v5. We just did that for our fan tournament that we did, 2K LAN tournament. But in season 1, we didn't actually have online matchmaking with the other teams, and so most of practice was inter-team 3-on-3. And our mode of the game requires 5 logged in players, so there would be AI on the court as well. But we would basically be playing inter-team games. And then we had some groups, some local guys come out and hoop from time to time, at the gaming house at the Bell 5 house.
Cool.
So we would do some like local practice with some teams. But a turning point for our first season was we did a boot camp in Detroit, and so we drove down to Detroit and just gamed with them for like 2 straight days and ran like 50 plus scrims on the league build, which is crazy now because we play so much 2K on the league build. But in season 1, like it was almost like you were showing up every week to the
just
studio and playing it for the first time, really 5v5. Like I said, there is very unique ability in this league, and there's style, and so you know when you're only playing 3-on-3 inter team, like you learn how to beat your teammate, but then the center that you play that week has a totally different style, and you've adapted to your teammate. So.
Well, that's why scrims are important against other teams.
And so this year we had online matchmaking, and we did tons and tons of scrimming. But 2K is a game of feel and timing and shot release, and online is just totally different timing than on LAN. So like one of my Jerry, our center who we've protected going into season 3, won't warm up in the backstage of the studio, and it's not because he's not motivated or anything. I mean, his motivation is all in the right place. He's very competitive, wants to win. He doesn't want to mess with his muscle memory. He wants his first shot in game to be the shot that he calibrates against, and the fact that he's so damn good that he can take one shot and calibrate to the point where he can deliver at a pro level consistently, because he's quiet, but then at the end of the game he's just always up there on the stats. It's like, you don't even know it's not flashy, but he's just always there, and his style of game is an outside center, so he really creates space for our point guard to work as well. So usually those guys aren't the ones who show up on the stat sheet, so he's just super consistent that way. It's
now
cool.
I am curious about some of the ideas, concepts behind everything. So most recently, there was an article that Michael Singh wrote reporting that Frederick Mendoza was traded to Cavs Legion GC in exchange for a second-round pick in the upcoming 2020 NBA 2K League draft. To me, as somebody who is rather uneducated about NBA 2K League, this doesn't make sense as a concept. So I'm curious about how much you can explain about what picks are and what trades are, and why getting a second round pick is important.
Mm-hmm. There is an open combine. So right now the qualifier started yesterday, actually. Yeah. To get into the combine, you have to win 50 games you have to play 50 games with a higher than 50% win rate, and you have to do it within rec or pro-am. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, you get into the combine. And the combine is just basically a different game mode that opens up for a fixed window, and it's solo queue, so you can't go in with your teammates, and you just go into the combine with people who are also trying to get into the league. Right. And so the expectation there is that these are serious players, and there's been some concern that just there's some people in the combine who aren't as serious from time to time, but I think it is a cool way of figuring this out, because if you just scouted from the pro-am community, it wouldn't create much opportunity for people who are unknown to rise to the surface. And I think that the way that they look at the data and the way that they match people up within the combine will only continue to get better. And so I think it is a cool thing for us to use to figure out who should be in the draft pool. And then from there, they do a whole bunch of different there's a whole bunch of elements to the process. So they first of all crunch the numbers from the combine and see who were the top performers at every position. And then they do social media checks on them, interviews with them, criminal background checks, that sort of thing. And then ultimately a certain number of players get added to a draft pool. And then, in March, all the teams go down there and we draft, we have to fill a roster of 6. So right now we have 2 players locked in for next season. So we'll be drafting 4 unless something changes.
Right.
Is this one of the ways that people get picked up and noticed by Raptors Uprising? Or is this like a step after that?
Isn't this like the only way to get noticed?
This is the only way to get into the league. Yeah. There's no free market. I can't just go out and sign someone. I have to build my team through the draft or through trades with other players who were drafted. So the only way for a player to get in is through the draft. Yeah,
you can't be like, hey, my nephew.
Exactly. Even if the combine misses an elite player, GM can't just reach out to the league and say, I want to pick up this guy.
Right. It doesn't work that way.
Wow. Yeah. That seems difficult. Is it difficult?
I mean, it's different. It's unique than the way that other esports leagues operate. I actually think it's kind of refreshing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's nice is it allows us to just try to be good at general managing as opposed to being limited or enabled by the size of our budget.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like, if you're in a more of a traditional, like we would have a leg up, quite frankly, if it was a free market, because we have a great player program. Our gaming house is best of breed, and
I do want to talk about
you
that.
know, we produce really good content. The players, you know, they're trying to build their own brand, so they love that we do North Code, and you know, they get to you know, have a time capsule of their experience here as well. So we would do well in attracting talent if it was a free market.
Absolutely.
So you know, but I'll never. That doesn't mean that I think it's the right thing to do.
Right.
Right. So I like the way that they do it.
It is great to be fair to everybody. Absolutely.
And it just creates a lot of buzz. 72,000 people in the season 1 combine. Like, that's all prospective viewership for season 1. And every year, you know, and the fact that people have to think like, am I good enough to potentially do this? You know, it creates a really strong impression.
Absolutely.
And so that just becomes low hanging fruit to become our fan base and our audience if they don't make it.
Cool. So I want to know more about the Bell 5 house. I think we've seen videos and we've seen tours.
Amazing.
It looks amazing.
It looks
cool.
really cool.
Chris has been there.
I'm curious what you feel, in your words, that this does for the team. Why is this specifically a positive experience for the team?
So look, I mean, I think that the idea of gaming houses is dated, to be honest. And I think if you're in a 12-month around the year program, like if you're a Counter-Strike team or something, and there's like a very short off season at the end of the summer,
right?
I don't think it's a healthy model. And I think like the best organizations in the world are also in alignment with that and are building centralized facilities, and either they have, you know, individual private rooms so everyone has their own space, which is still less ideal, or they commute into work and they have an apartment in town or whatever. I actually think that that's better.
It's healthier, like you said.
Yeah, I think after a certain point, there's only so much bonding that needs to happen between a team, and the pressures of needing to perform can really add up. And so I think a lot of teams that maybe have good in-game chemistry but fall into a rut then spiral out of control because of out-of-game issues, right? So it's like, okay, well, now we're not playing well, and I hate you. And I hate living with you, and I hate that you leave all your dishes in the sink and all that kind of stuff, right? Whereas if they had their own space, then it could be like, I don't like you, but we're really good together, and you know, and I probably like you more now that I don't live with you, and let's just work through this rough patch because we're good at work, you know.
So that's why we see a lot of boot camps show up from time to time.
Different reasons. I mean, another reason why boot camps happen, depending upon the game, is because you know, teams are from different regions, and when they're going to, you know, go play a tournament in a particular region, well, one, you want to go and get acclimated to it,
concentrated.
But like back in the day, like North American teams would go over to Europe to boot camp because it was a better region. So even just you know, matchmaking back then, you know, but now, but more importantly, so they could scrimmage against the European-based teams, right?
You want to play on LAN. You don't want to play online, and
of course.
Yeah, well, they're still playing online from the boot camps.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, because usually you're in your own facility for boot camp, but it is, you know, back then everyone wasn't always living together either, so you know, the ability to be in the same room together with your coach for 2 weeks or a week or whatever. Yeah, so there was that. With NBA 2K League, thank you, it's a short season. And so I think that, you know, you come in and really do get to know your teammates quickly because you're living in the same house together. And you know, it's an added advantage. We have our gaming stations in the Bell 5 house that you know, they can go and be available to scrim at night. You know, there's West Coast teams, so if you have to commute into your training facility, you know, most of the time you have your scrim schedule set up for the day. But every week our team picks up additional scrims just because a team on the West Coast will message them at 7 p.m. and know that we're a team that lives with our, you know, lives in the same space as our gaming stations.
Not all teams do have a team house. You guys are one of the
teams
few.
Are all different. Teams are all different. Some of them have centralized facilities, which is cool. But and again, I think it is the right model. But for our league, this works because it's a shorter season, and so it is cool to build team chemistry and then the added advantage of being able to get more scrims in. Because the gaming stations are there.
That's great. All right, so I want to move on to some of the other.
Yeah, that was a lot of Raptors Uprising. So
yeah, exactly. So maybe we'll go a little bit quicker through the other ones. So I do want to talk about EMLS. So would either of you guys be able to tell me a little bit about EMLS?
I don't know too much, to be honest. I'm hoping that Shane knows a little bit more.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, I would hope so. EMLS is Major League Soccer, Electronic Major League Soccer. So it's their FIFA program. So we have a pro player named Phil Balke, who is signed to Toronto FC. So he plays for Toronto FC not only in EMLS, which we're going into our third season of as well.
Yeah.
Launched around the same time as the 2K League, the same year as the 2K League. That was originally just a 1 weekend tournament at PAX, and then it became a 3-event league last year where we had 2 stops, which made up the regular season basically, and then went to PAX. And unannounced yet what the format is for this season, but it's like a growing sort of FIFA program. But so Phil participates in that for us, but also internationally. And so if you're familiar with like Weekend League and Foot Champions Cup, so Phil, is a top ranked North American. Last year I went to Bucharest with him for a Foot Champions Cup.
Wow. Right.
He had a great season. There was he ended up getting suspended. From Global Series, which was frustrating, but he was on track almost, I think at that point, assured to be in the World Cup playoffs and had qualified for a couple more events before that happened. So he's back this year, that's the format.
So with EMLS, you're talking one player that plays the whole team as opposed to the 5 teammate model.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like, there's been a couple show matches where like some EPL teams have put like 22 stations set up in formation on a pitch and on like a real soccer football pitch.
That's cool.
And they've played like show matches like that. But yeah, think about the infrastructure required to run an 11 on 11 esport,
sure.
right? It's super hard.
Crazy. So,
and honestly, from what I've seen with FIFA, it is really controlling formation, and it's 2K is very tight knit, and so AI like micro movements in 2K are the difference between being good and being pro, right? In FIFA, that is absolutely the case when you're on ball and when you're defending ball, but the rest of the there's more space between the player models, and so the rest of the team is moving more in waves and set formations, and so it's actually not as much of a problem, in my opinion, that FIFA has that much AI on the court.
Right.
In contrast to if we were playing 1-on-1 2K.
Right. Okay.
So this was very informative for me, because when I was doing my research for EMLS, I found essentially the same things that you're talking about Phil Balke and how he was signed on. And when I thought about bringing that up, I thought, no, that's not going to sound enough, because it can't just be one person. Like what happened? What did he essentially create the need to have EMLS, or was EMLS set in place before Phil was even signed?
No, EMLS is a Major League Soccer initiative, and so I don't actually know the number of teams, but we've just added a couple this year. But just like the 2K League, a certain proportion, a majority of the Major League Soccer franchises are now bought into this thing and have a player representing them.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Phil's also a Red Bull athlete, and Red Bull is a good partner of MLSE on lots of different projects. And so collectively, we identified Phil. Before my time, I came and Phil was already on contract and signed him.
Okay.
Both to TFC and to Red Bull.
Interesting.
Fantastic.
Very interesting. All right. And then let's move on to Leafs Gaming League,
where I think that was the first time we ever met. So yeah. And I met Zach Hyman there, talked a little bit about 11, not E11.
Yeah. Yeah. So Leafs Gaming League, we're now in season 2. We are 1 week into our LGL, just over 1 week into our LGL online qualifier number 1. And so the way that it's working this year is it is basically a 3-week online qualifier. It's powered by World Gaming. So they're the tournament site that is setting up the matchmaking. Yeah. So on certain nights during that 3-week window, the matchmaking queue opens and players can go to World Gaming and find an opponent. Right. For those who want to play, it is on nights that the Leafs aren't playing. So our audience is Leafs fans, and so the idea is if the Leafs aren't playing that night, then you can engage with us by playing in Leafs Gaming League, and it's a good night. We don't want anyone to ever have to decide between watching the Leafs and earning ELO in Leafs Gaming League.
You don't want to cannibalize.
Exactly, and then we're also not on Friday nights because World Gaming has Chell with Nasher on Friday nights that we just didn't want to compete with.
Right. Cool.
So so during that 3-week window, players go online during the matchmaking queue and basically climb an ELO-based ladder, and then at the end of this 3-week period, which is going to end on Sunday, November 4th, we're going to look at the ranks, and the top 16 from each console will get invited to LGL on LAN number 1. And so there we're going to do a LAN tournament. It's going to have like more of an off-stream group stage, and we're going to narrow down 32 to 16, and then we'll go on to a live stream on Twitch and run an elimination bracket, basically. and then we repeat that 3 times over. So there are 3 LGL on lines, 3 LGL on lands. Performance on both earns you LGL points,
right,
which transcend each event. And so at the end of the season, we're going to aggregate all the points earned across all the 6 stages, and we're going to determine the top 16 to come and play in the finals. And we're going to do a similar tournament live on stream from the studio. And they're going to be competing for $20,000 prize pool, as well as 1 million scene points.
Yeah, 1 million scene. How many movies can you watch?
It's 1,000 movies. It's 1,000 movies. So it's movies for life, but they want to make it clear that it's not just movies. There are tons of things that you can do with scene points, which is going to be, I think, a funny part of our show. We're going to tap into that a little bit.
That's super interesting. I can't wait to see that.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how do the actual NHL Leafs players get involved in the Leafs Gaming League?
Well, so last year we had a event called Leafs Gaming Day, and so they play their own tournament called Face Off. And so that is not, that is just offline amongst the team to determine who the best Chell player is. And then they have a wrestling belt that I actually coined the Chelt last year. It's like not even creative. I don't know why I just try to take credit for that, but
I think it's pretty funny actually.
I'll take it.
So they have a wrestling belt that we custom made, which has Face Off as Leafs branding on it. And so they play their own inter-team tournament for that. And so they've done that 2 years running. We'll see if they do it this year,
Okay. So do the players in the Leafs Gaming League actually get a chance to play any of the NHL players, or?
Well, nothing like that announced at this point. But last year we did have one of the players in the league got to play with Austin Matthews. That was a special special promotion that was enabled by Scotiabank.
I see.
So we'll see if we have not yet announced anything like that this year.
That was a very cool event, though. I think FaZe Clan was there as well. There was some Fortnite happening as well as the NHL. So
we did. It was not just Leafs Gaming League. It was Leafs Gaming Day last year, and so the Leafs are big Fortnite guys, as everybody knows. And our friends at FaZe Clan are huge Leafs fans, but also obviously Fortnite was closer to their brand at that time. So we were like, oh, let's do some integrated Fortnite content as well. And so we had opportunities for fans to play Fortnite with FaZe Clan as well as with members of the Leafs. We had the Leafs inter-team tournament face-off, and then we had our Leafs Gaming Day tournament.
So that's why we saw the Leafs there as well.
Yeah, and then we had our own $5,000 tournament, which was just for Leafs Gaming League players.
Right.
And so we had a little, it was sort of like there's 3 different programs running that day at the one event.
I see. So that kind of led to my confusion then.
Yeah. Not you weren't alone. It was too much for one day.
Here you go. Okay, so just before we go, I want to. I think each of us kind of has one question. Alex, I know you wanted to ask something about geolocation.
I really wanted to know what you think about geolocated leagues. What do you think? Good, bad?
Have you heard me talk about this before?
I have not actually. So.
I'm pro. I always instinctually, I think, was when I heard about the concepts, because it just made sense to me that you can unlock. It's easier to unlock a fan base from the playing community who play the game if there's a local affinity, right? If there's like a sense of sort of you can tap into that like tribalism, right?
So for me, can you tell me about what geolocated teams are?
Yes.
So there are a few franchise leagues now in esports, and Overwatch League, obviously League of Legends, NBA 2K League, Overwatch League, and NBA 2K League, and Call of Duty League now, of course.
Right.
Overwatch League, 2K League, and Call of Duty League are all localized around city markets. So Toronto Defiant, Toronto Raptors Uprising, obviously. And then League of Legends is not. So it's franchised. So you can't just earn your way in. You can't just sort of enter by buying a roster.
Oh, you can't do that. Huh?
No,
it's closed.
It's closed. Oh. It's a closed ecosystem of owners who own the franchise, but they are not located around specific markets. So I'm in favor of this. I mean, I always, again, kind of instinctually was, just because it made sense to me to unlock a fan base. Like I always, from the perspective of wanting to make sure that esports isn't just this like thing that's cool for a few years and then kind of dies out. I always knew that we need to, massively add accelerant onto the development of fan bases and the ability to monetize them and to make them so passionate that they will be monetized. They will spend against the team.
Do you think that geolocated, some people think that geolocated teams are limiting your fan base to one city, and that will actually hurt you. Whereas, internationally, we could have millions of fans where in a city you might,
Yeah, totally. And, but what you have to understand about those models is it's feast and famine then. So if you have the best teams, then you're going to be the FaZe clans and the Optics and Envy, Envy probably a tier down, but you're going to be those tier 1 brands like it was in Call of Duty. And so, then you bring in all the sponsorship revenue, and then you can continue to outbid the rest of the teams in the market to continue to have the best teams. And so in a competitive league ecosystem, you need 30 functioning franchises if you look at traditional sports, right?
Definitely.
None of the esports leagues are at 30 yet, nor is it clear that they need to be there, but they're certainly growing. I mean, what's Overwatch League at now? It's well over 20, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. So
and they're growing as well.
Right. So for these leagues to function, like there needs to be the ability for all these teams to thrive, right? Sports is not a good business. It's a very low margin business. I mean, the owners behind the teams in traditional sports, and now most of those groups now are the ones who are buying into these esports franchise leagues. They do this not because of the annual returns. Usually it's for passion, quite frankly. In our case, we're owned by Bell and Rogers, so it's the live sports, how critical that is to the success of cable TV going forward, right? And subscriptions for TV packages, but it's about asset appreciation. Like you end up buying into an asset that becomes worth hundreds of millions of dollars, or in some cases $1 billion. And so I think, the idea here is that you hope that this, tens of millions that you're investing today turns into an asset that might not be super profitable anytime soon or ever really, low margin, right?
Yeah.
But will be valued at $200 million. It will have constantly increasing costs because it just costs money to run these things, right? The bigger the operation gets, the higher the player salaries get, the more supporting staff you need, the more content you need to pump out, the more people you need to put into an arena, and all that comes with costs, right? So so that's the play, is
appreciating assets. Okay.
Yeah, that's why you get into this business, is because you're going to buy into something like the way that the original investors in Raptors bringing them to Toronto did, right? Now they have a massively valuable franchise that if they wanted to sell, they would get paid, right? No individual year the profit is crazy, but that's just sports, right? And those are successful teams. There are teams that lose money every year. And so that's why in these leagues, there's revenue sharing, right? The teams that do well share revenue with the teams that don't do so well to help them keep the lights on, because you need to keep those, you need to keep that league running, right? So
that's a problem that's pretty rampant among other esports for sure.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And to be clear, just because of the way the root of the question was about localizing, I mean, it rings true even in the league model where there isn't tied to local markets, right? The ecosystem
there is rev share still.
Yeah, of course. But where I think localizing actually helps on that side, on the business, on the revenue generation side too, is the ability to activate regional partners. And so it's a challenge if you have a massive international audience and you're trying to do a deal with a really big Canadian telecom company, but your 8% of your audience is Canada. It's hard. Basically the pool of sponsors that you can partner with are global CPG brands, right? And again, same thing. Then that's kind of like a feast and famine model, because there's only so many of those, and so they're going to go to the biggest plays. And then if you're in more of a free market and there isn't localization and rev sharing, then the next rung of teams really don't get much of anything.
Right.
Definitely.
So yeah, I think from both from a fan base and from just an activating regional partners perspective, I think it makes a ton of sense.
Last question that I want to do before we go. I kind of touched on this before, but I want to ask in kind of a general umbrella. If there's a player out there, if one of our listeners right now is interested in getting into the esports that we've been talking about, right? So they're really passionate about NHL. They're really passionate about 2K. What can they do to get themselves to the pro level?
Well, be born with incredible gifts, just like just like any athlete. Then work really hard.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's a universe where anybody just works hard and doesn't have that.
So talent is required.
That natural talent, that to be born with it. There's no doubt about it.
So then
it's
once
different, right?
if you have that, what's the next step? How do you get into this?
If you're in Toronto, follow our teams, follow our programs, follow me, because we are doing lots of local activations. We're doing lots of content. We're bringing people together using Discord to help form teams and stuff like that. But every game is unique, right? So there's not one answer for any game. So but I'll tell you, there is a competitive community. It usually the lifeline, the pulse is Twitter. So be on Twitter for sure. If you're trying to get into competitive gaming, I think in any community, I don't know that any are anywhere but thrive anywhere but Twitter. That is where the discourse is for sure.
That it definitely is something that I've heard consistent among a lot of different esports is, be active in your community if you want to be a part of it. Right. Yeah. I think that is going to ring true for no matter what you go for.
And that's easier said than done. I think if you initially just join as an observer, then that's good too. Get the lay of the land. Right. Yeah. I don't know. I could go back. Like, I think I probably tried tweeting at first because nobody knew what they were doing. And I thought like, hey, maybe someone wants to read my tweets. But the reality is I was working for a software company. Nobody wanted to read my tweets. And so I realized that and just started using Twitter to consume content. And, the more people I followed in the esports industry, the more I learned. And so if you're interested in a specific community, like find the influencers, find the pros, find the teams that are doing good content and hosting good events, especially if there's one in your local market, and just follow along for a bit. See where those opportunities are. You'll see how the people who are like, steps ahead of you are doing it, right? So like right now you've got the really known players from the 2K League who have a certain pedigree on social, but then there are that next rung of players who, quite frankly, I think like it's not clear yet who the next wave of talent coming into the league is. I mean, it is clear like a season out, but there are a lot of people who are doing a good job of getting their name out there through different hustles that I don't even know. Are these guys any good? Like, are they close to pro? Are they pro? Are they, but they're going to be going through the combine this year because we have this open ecosystem. So look at those guys, right? Like if you see other people who aren't known, aren't playing on top pro-am teams, aren't in the 2K League, but are gaining some following and are making an impression on general managers. And at first it's just literally like reaching out in an appropriate way, right? So, adding a GM of a team with the properly worded tweet and, a link to your mixtape or whatever, right?
Right.
And I think at first we're not talking 2K League teams, we're talking pro-am teams, right? Like try to get noticed from pro-am teams and try to find people. And, you're probably not going to get onto the top teams at first. So see the other guys in the comments who aren't getting, responded to from the elite player and be like, hey, you're not getting a response. I'm not getting a response. Like let's team up and see if we can grind in some pro-am. And if you are good, then you will bring your team to a certain level, and then you'll probably be limited by your teammates. But the other teams you're playing against will recognize that you're hooping. And so then reach out to them afterwards and say, hey, I was the shooting guard on that team you just played. If you guys ever need someone to run with, like, let me know.
Oh, right? Fantastic.
So networking's a part of it.
Oh, absolutely. Everything's a part of it. Absolutely. Yeah.
One thing that I love that you said is reach out in an appropriate way. There is so many players who are reaching out in inappropriate ways.
Oh, yeah.
Sponsor me. Can I join your team? Like, that's not how you get signed, sponsored, anything. So
look, I mean, it's not going to work. And so usually when I see it, I just kind of laugh it off. And it's just funny that, that the people who know what they're doing are usually more hesitant to just tweet things, and then this person
right.
It's hard to understand, like, how do they think that this might work?
Exactly.
So you almost wonder if you're getting trolled, but yeah.
All right, well, you know what, I think that is a fantastic place to end this. Shane, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you
today.
so much.
My pleasure, guys.
Appreciate your time.
It was fantastic hearing everything that you have to say. Where can people find you online?
Twitter is my main business related channel, esports related channel. So It's just my name, Shane Talbot, at Shane Talbot. But for Uprising, Twitter is also where Raptors Up. That's our main channel. I'm slightly embarrassed to say that we have 1.2K subs on YouTube, but YouTube is obviously the more searchable repository of our content. So I'm going to, because I'm going to get ahead of my embarrassment that we have 1,000 views on Northcote because I've been raving about it, but we get 80,000-90,000 views on Twitter, right? It's significantly bigger on Twitter, but there is a playlist within the Raptors Uprising GC YouTube channel where you could watch Northcote, for instance, and that's the docuseries I mentioned a couple of times. It's a cool behind the scenes look at what we've been doing.
So check
for
them out
seasons.
on Twitter and YouTube.
Yeah, and I don't know when you guys are releasing this, but this week the next episode of Northcote is going to drop.
Alex, where can people find you?
Probably Instagram. You can find me at
probably
KrispyKim Donut.
There you go. And of course, you can find me, StillJustMike, on wherever you get your socials. You can find me on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Instagram, all at StillJustMike. And of course, you can follow Best of 3 Podcast at BO3 Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. Follow us wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a review on iTunes, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.